The folder on the desk is last year's review. The grant that folder approved is still on. A person who left in March can still open a session in August if nobody took the key back. The anniversary stamp does not watch that session. The review was last year because a point-in-time review is a photograph. The grant is still on. The anniversary stamp does not know what changed after the meeting. TPRM has to watch the grant that is still accepted, not the date on the folder. Third-party risk management has to keep watching a grant after the meeting ends. TPRM that only stamps an anniversary will bless a door that still opens. TPRM does not freeze a vendor on the day of the meeting. The work is to keep imported risk inside the board's appetite while the vendor keeps changing. A program that only photographs the first Tuesday will keep blessing a grant that no longer matches the work. A point-in-time review records who held which key, which control existed, and which subcontractor was named on that Tuesday. The record is useful. It cannot see a hire, a feature, or a fourth party that arrived on Wednesday. Vendors do not freeze. They ship features, hire people, add subcontractors, and change architecture. Access should collapse to the minimum when status changes. A person who leaves, a project that ends, or a vendor that loses a role should lose the key the same day. The next grant should be rebuilt from need, not from habit. A system can still accept a session, a token, or a role after the review has already been filed. Acceptance is a protocol fact. The folder can be closed. The door can still open. A photograph cannot revoke. Identity and access management can end the session today. That is the difference between a stamp and a control. An annual questionnaire goes stale for a simple reason. The form asks questions about a building that has already been remodeled. The answers were true on the day they were written. The grant, the staff, and the subcontractors kept moving after the ink dried. A 12-month-old form cannot see a key that was issued last Tuesday. Attackers do not pause for the annual calendar. The anniversary month is a calendar habit, not a control. Teams pick a date because audit asked for an annual stamp. The date does not know that a token was issued in May, that a subcontractor was added in July, or that a feature shipped in October. A control watches those events. A habit waits for next March. Waiting for next March is how a grant stays on for 11 months after the work ended. 4 things change after the photograph, and each one can keep a grant on after the review has already been filed. The first thing that changes is people. The engineer who sat through the review leaves. A new contractor joins on a shared inbox. A support firm adds a night shift in another country. The written contract still names the same company. The people who can open a session are not the people the photograph recorded. Identity and access management is the system that grants, reviews, and revokes those names. A folder cannot revoke a person it no longer recognizes. The second thing that changes is keys. A token is issued for a 6-week project and never expires. An admin password is shared when a ticket runs long. A machine credential is copied into a script. The review asked whether multi-factor authentication existed as a policy. The grant that still works is a token nobody listed. Rotation of a human password does not close a machine path that remains valid. The third thing that changes is fourth parties. A fourth party is a vendor's vendor, a subcontractor, a cloud region, or an open-source library the invoice never named. The photograph named the company on the purchase order. The hop that arrived in June did not ask permission a second time. If that hidden node fails, the data that leaves is still yours. The fourth thing that changes is features. A payroll tool adds an artificial intelligence assistant that reads employee files. A support portal gains a production debug switch. A cloud application opens a new region. The questionnaire asked about last year's product. The product is not last year's product. A feature that can reach data, identity, or the build is a new grant, even when the logo on the invoice did not change. The May token, the July subcontractor, and the October feature all arrived after the photograph was already in the folder. The anniversary date does not know those 3 months. A control would have watched each one as it landed. A habit still waits for next March. Those 4 changes only count if the evidence in the folder can see them. Age is part of the evidence. Attestation is a vendor's self-report about a control or a process. It is useful. It is not a watch on today's grant. The letter can be honest about last year's walls and still miss this year's door. A SOC 2 letter from last year is the usual photograph. Theater is treating that letter as a win. This cut is about time. A letter can be genuine and still be too old to watch the grant that is still on. Recent evidence is an artifact an investigator can use this month. Ask for the current enrollment list. Ask for the last key ceremony. Ask for the last revoke test. Ask for the names of fourth parties added since the last review. Ask for a diagram that matches the architecture that is running, not the architecture that was sold. Ask for a log that shows who opened a privileged session last week. A specific file from last month beats a polished letter from last year. A letter from last year can prove that a process existed. It cannot prove that last Tuesday's token is still the token you meant to issue. Certificates, tokens, people, and pipes change after the meeting. The useful question is not whether a report sits in the folder. The useful question is whether the artifact is recent enough to describe the grant the system still accepts. Stale and recent sit on one table, so the difference is a property of the artifact, not a feeling about the vendor. A questionnaire dated last spring is stale. An enrollment list from this month is recent. An 18-month letter is stale. A revoke test from last quarter is recent. A policy that says multi-factor authentication exists is stale the moment a token is issued without it. Age is a field on the evidence. Treat it that way. Continuous monitoring means ongoing sight of a vendor's posture, including vulnerabilities, leaked credentials, architecture changes, clauses in the written contract that require notice of change, and new fourth parties. Critical vendors also need a conversation that is not a replay of last year's form. A supply chain changes when a vendor adds a feature, hires a subcontractor, or merges. Control that cannot see that changes control of a photograph. Access should collapse to the minimum when status changes. The grant that was right for a 6-week project is wrong on week 20. The key that was right for an engineer who left is wrong the morning after. Continuous eyes are not a dashboard hobby. Continuous eyes are how a grant that is still on stays as small as the work that remains. People, keys, fourth parties, and features change after the meeting. An annual questionnaire goes stale because the answers were true on a Tuesday the grant has already left. Recent evidence is an enrollment list, a key ceremony, a revoke test, and new fourth parties from this month, not a letter from last year. The May token, the July subcontractor, and the October feature are the calendar the anniversary never saw. A habit waits for next March. A control watches those months. Thank you.